Our starting point this morning is the Supreme Court, and the centerpiece of the president's health care overhaul is really what's on trial before the Supreme Court. It's going to happen in roughly 2 hours or so, and it will focus on the question, can government force people to buy something they don't necessarily want? It goes back to the Commerce Clause in the Constitution from 1787, which says this: the Congress shall have power to regulate commerce with foreign nations and among the several states and with Indian tribes. Supporters of the individual mandate say making people buy insurance is constitutional because it falls under that Commerce Clause. Opponents say, no, you can't regulate inaction. A decision to not buy health insurance doesn't count as commerce. Supporters answer to that: all those uninsured people create a $43 billion a year bill in unpaid medical bills, and that impacts commerce. Joining me this morning is South Carolina Attorney Alan Wilson. Jeff Toobin is back as well. He is CNN's senior legal analyst. It's nice to see you, sir, so I will start with you this morning. You are one of the people who was interested in bringing this lawsuit. Why do you think that you can win on this case?
Well, what you just read was the Commerce Clause, and in that clause it says Congress shall have the power to regulate commerce. This is the first time in the history of our country that a law was passed where Congress created commerce by shoving people into it, by forcing them to enter into a contract that they may or may not want or need, and then regulate them after they shove them in. Congress was very specific, or rather the drafters of the Constitution were very specific when they drafted that clause. If you look right below that clause, Congress was given the power to create money, to coin money and then regulate it, to provide for a Navy and an Army and then regulate it. They never once gave Congress the power to create commerce, only to regulate it. But in this case, they're effectively creating commerce by compelling people to enter into a contract that they may not want.
And the argument on the other side, and I think Jeff Toobin is with you, would be that they would say, actually, it's not creating commerce, it's regulating commerce. I can hear the protesters, so that means Jeff Toobin's with us. The argument on the other side is that same interpretation of that Commerce Clause.
Are you talking to me?
Yeah, I am, Jeff. Sorry, I know the noise behind you is very loud.
Yeah, the idea is that if you choose not to buy health insurance, you are making an economic decision that has implications for the whole country. If you choose not to buy health insurance and you get hit by a car, you're going to be taken to the hospital. You're going to be treated. Somebody's going to pay for that. That is an economic decision that has an effect that Congress is allowed to regulate. That's the argument, that there is no such thing as being outside the commerce of the healthcare market, and that's why Congress has the right to regulate.
It sounds then that it's not just about Mr. Wilson, commerce being created. It sounds like commerce is created, is what the other side would say. What makes you have hope for your side in the arguments that you heard yesterday, sir?
Well, real quick, the argument that I just heard about this being a healthcare market is kind of a misnomer. It's a health insurance market. Not eating cheeseburgers or choosing to eat a cheeseburger or choosing to breathe even affects the healthcare market in the aggregate. So if they define it as a healthcare market and not a health insurance market, they can regulate any and every aspect of anyone's life so long as they're breathing or eating. Yesterday's arguments were specifically on the Anti-Injunction Act, which basically said that if this is not a tax, then it's not barred, the court is not barred by the Anti-Injunction Act from hearing the rest of this case. It's kind of funny where the government 2 years ago, for political reasons, said this isn't a tax, this is a penalty. Now, because it's constitutionally convenient, they're arguing that it is a tax, and they can tax, they can regulate, not regulate, but they can tax under their authority in the Constitution. So I feel very good that the justices had a lot of concerns about whether or not this was actually a tax and not a penalty.
So, Jeff Toobin, I'm going to ask you to expand on that for me, because we've heard it called a requirement, we've heard it called a command, we've heard it called a tax, we've heard it called a penalty, we've heard it called a provision. Why does the nuance in that word really matter?
Well, I think it mattered yesterday because of this very obscure law, the Anti-Injunction Act. The Anti-Injunction Act said, in effect, you can't challenge the legality of a tax until you actually pay the tax. And here, the law doesn't go into effect until 2015. The argument is, if it's a tax law that doesn't go into effect until 2015, you shouldn't go to court until 2015. One of the arguments that was made yesterday is that whole law law is irrelevant because this isn't a tax, it's a penalty. I actually think those sorts of enabling disputes are not terribly meaningful, and I don't think the court thinks they're very meaningful. I mean, one of the things Chief Justice Roberts said in the argument yesterday is, look, this is, you know, you're paying money. Regardless of what you label it, you are going to have to pay money if you don't get health insurance. And I think that's the appropriate analysis. It's not labeling, it's sort of what is the function, what is happening in the real world. And under the Affordable Care Act, if you choose not to get health insurance, you have to pay a certain amount to the government. Instead, whether you call that a tax or a penalty, I don't think is terribly significant, but that is what you have to do, in fact, in the real world.
We're going to give it to Alan Wilson for our final question, because I know Jeff Toobin's having a really hard time hearing over those protesters. You've called this, sir, the most important case of a lifetime. Why?
Well, just that. This case will determine if we have a government of limited powers or a government with unlimited powers. If the court rules that Congress can, in fact, regulate inactivity for anyone who basically breathes, then there's no end to what Congress can compel you to do. And fundamentally, this is forcing people into contracts. Contracts are supposed to be between two parties who are mutually agreeing to do something together. In this case, you're being forced into a contract. There's nothing mutual about that, and that is a fundamental protection.
Alan Wilson is the South Carolina Attorney General, and we thank you for joining us this morning. We certainly appreciate. Jeff Toobin is with him as well at the Supreme Court.